Yes, we're learning in memory of Dvar Rachel Bas Alter Aharon. May her neshama have an aliyah. Okay, we saw machlokas yesterday between Rav and Shmuel, which we're going to expand upon today, just for a short time. The machlokas was, what happens if you had a wall to divide between two chatzers, and as a result, each chatzer had its own eruv, and then the wall collapses on Shabbos. Or alternatively, you have, that's the case that they're discussing. The wall collapses. The question is, since the wall was up from before Shabbos, can you continue in carrying in each respective chatzer? Rav says you cannot, and Shmuel says you can. Once the wall was up, and there were duly constituted eruvin in each respective chatzar, you can continue carrying, and then you'll fix it for next Shabbos. So the Gemara now says, V'ha derav, the second line of Daf Tzadi Daled, V'ha derav lav beferish itmar ela michlala itmar. This statement of Rav was not said explicitly, but rather it was inferred from the following Maisa. The Ravu Shmuel havu yasvi be'ahu chatzer. Rav and Shmuel were once sitting in a courtyard, and this was on Shabbos. Nafal guda de beini beini, and the wall that was dividing between their courtyard and the adjacent courtyard collapsed in the middle of Shabbos. And the dilemma was, what are they supposed to do? So Amar lahu Shmuel shkulu glima negidu ba, and Shmuel said, take a garment and hang it up in place of the wall. Now, the question is, why did he need to do that? According to Shmuel, you shouldn't have to do that at all. According to Shmuel, you can continue carrying. Well, we'll see in just a second. Ahadrinu Rav le'ape. Rav turned around. He didn't want anyone to get the impression that he was assenting to the psak of Shmuel. Amar lahu Shmuel, ikapid abba, shkulu hamyane v'kitruba. So Shmuel said, if Rav, he called him Abba, the father, if Rav is makpid, if he doesn't like what I'm suggesting, then take the garment and tie it to his belt. Now, the question, of course, is what does he mean by that? The Meiri says that he was making a joke, basically saying, force him to bind himself to this psak. But the Meiri says it was milsa bidichusa. It was words of jest. In other words, acknowledging that Rav did not agree to what he was saying, but nevertheless he said, this is the way we're going to do it. So now the Gemara says, V'lishmuel lama liha. So now the question is, why? And by the way, the inference was the fact that Rav turned around showed that he felt that there was something problematic about putting up a garment in order to create a mechitza, and that this was not going to help anything. So Rashi says it's because he felt that you're not allowed to carry the garment to bring it over, because now it's usher to carry in the chatzar. There are other Rishonim learn differently. They say that Rav was of the opinion that you're not allowed to create a mechitza, an ohel arai. You're not allowed to create this temporary curtain on Shabbos. But the point is that Rav did not agree that this remedy was going to be helpful at all. So the Gemara says, but why was it necessary for Shmuel to hang a garment at all? Amar zemetaltal adikar mechitza, v'zemetaltal adikar mechitza. Didn't Shmuel, we just learned yesterday, that if the wall completely collapses, then each chatzer can carry up until where the wall used to be, without any kind of remedy. So Shmuel avad litzniusa ba'alma. The answer is that Shmuel just wanted privacy. He wasn't doing this to remedy any kind of Shabbos problem. He just felt, look, I don't want the neighbors to see me. I don't want to have to look at the neighbors, and that's why he wanted to put it up. So now the question is, V'ravi sfirale da'asr lamalei. So the Gemara now says, if Rav held that what Shmuel was doing was asr by schlepping this garment, then why didn't he just make a formal protest? He should have said something. So the Gemara says, Asri de Shmuel Hava. The answer is, it was Shmuel's city, and Shmuel was the paisik of the city, so it's not appropriate for Rav to contest him. Ihachi my taima ahadrinu la'ape. So if that's the case, then why did Rav turn around? So the Gemara answers, Delo nemru kishmuel svirale, because he didn't want anyone to think that he was actually agreeing with Shmuel and that he had changed his opinion. He wanted people to know, listen, I respect the posek of the city. He's got to do what he's got to do, right? But I personally don't hold of it, so I'm just going to look the other way.
2,000 years later, we got the message from him.
2,000 years later, we're still trying to get the message. Yeah. Halavai that everyone should have derech eretz like Rav,
It's actually a sign of respect.
Yeah. Okay. Chatzar, now let's go on to the next Mishnah. Chatzar shenifritz l'rishus harabim. If you have a courtyard, and the courtyard develops a breach. Now here we're not talking about that it happens on Shabbos, but we're just saying that there's a breach, and the breach opens up into Rishus Harabim. So the question now is, what is the status of the Chatzar? Hamachnis mitocha l'Rishus Hayachid and Rishus Hayachid l'tocha chayiv divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer assigns the Chatzar as a real Rishus Harabim, since it's completely opened into a Rishus Harabim, and therefore, were you to transfer from a Rishus Hayachid, let's say behind the Chatzar into the Chatzar, you will have done a malacha deoraisa of transferring from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim. Now we're going to have to qualify this very severely in just a moment, but that's at face value. V'chachamim omrim mitocha l'Rishus Harabim or Rishus Harabim l'tocha pater mipnei shehi kakarmelis. The Chachamim disagree. They say that this chatzar, granted it's breached and it opens up to Rishus Harabim, however, it still retains its status as a karmelis, such that lechatchila you're not allowed to transfer anything from the chatzar to the Rishus Harabim, and it goes without saying that lechatchila you can't transfer anything from the Rishus Hayachid to the chatzar. But if you do so in either event, a karmelis that you transfer either from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim, it's asr midrabanan. But midiraisa, you're pater because you haven't done a malacha until you transfer from a real Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayachid. So now let's examine. Let's define what the machlokus is. Frek the Gemara of Rabbi Eliezer mishum denifritza l'Rishus Harabim havi l'Rishus Harabim ? Question mark. You mean just because a privately owned area opens up into a public area, then you assign it as a public area? I mean, after all, what the Gemara's implicit question is: this is my private property. So by what right does the public have to consider this their domain such that it's a Rishus Harabim? The Gemara's answer is in Rabbi Eliezer L'Tarmeh. Yes, Rabbi Eliezer goes according to his reasoning. D'Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Rabim Shabiru Derech La'atzman Ma Shabiru Beiruru. That Rabbi Eliezer says that if you have a privately owned field, okay, and you have a group of people who normally travel from one part of the city to the other, and the shortest way for them to get from point A to point B is through your field. If they basically stake a claim and start walking through your field, then through the principles of eminent domain, they basically acquire the rights of passage through your field. Now, this is not eminent domain of a government. This is sort of like power to the people kind of thing, where we basically say, because the public has chosen this path, by de facto they automatically get it. So the Gemara is therefore suggesting that even though this is my private property, but once the public starts using it, they can take it over and it becomes a Rishus Harabim. Hold on, your questions will be answered. We're just in the middle of the discussion. So the Gemara now says, Eini, is this really so? V'ha'amar Rav Gidol amarav v'husha avdalahen derech ba'oso sadeh. But one second. That's not the pshat of that Gemara, because Rav Gidol had, in the name of Rav, had carefully defined it, that's not true. You can't just have a public group of people sort of just encroach on my property. That halacha is only true when they already had rights of passage through this field. In other words, there had already been established legally that there was a pathway in my field that was open to the public, and that had always been the status. And what happened was, because, let's say, the path got lost, let's say weeds grew over it, and whatever, it hadn't been used in a while, and as a result, we can't find the original path, that's when we say, according to Rabbi Eliezer, whatever pathway they choose becomes default their pathway. But to say that something that was never awarded to the public de facto becomes the public's just because they have access to it, even Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold of that. So the Gemara now says, maybe you'll say that this is what's going on over here. And the way Rashi explains is as follows. Maybe you'll argue that, granted, Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah is not talking about the entire chutzner being a Rishus Harabim. He's talking about what happened is that there was a wall between my chutzner and the Rishus Harabim. That wall collapsed. And now we don't even see where the original wall demarcated between my domain and the public domain. And the public now is starting to encroach on the property with the claim, oh no, this was always part of the public thoroughfare. So here they are staking a claim. And maybe that's why Rabbi Eliezer would say in our Mishnah that the area of disputed territory between the Chatzar and the Rishus Harabim is what has the status of a Rishus Harabim, because the public is staking a claim, a legitimate claim, to say that this was part of the original passageway. That's where Rabbi Eliezer says that when you have a suffix as to where the original wall was, that area now is defined de facto as a Rishus Harabim. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute. If that's the pshat, v'hama Rabbi Chanina ad makom mechitza machlokes. But Rabbi Chanina had said that the only time that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is up until where the wall was standing. It's mashma where the wall was standing. Everyone agrees that that's a Rishus Harabim. But Rabbi Eliezer goes even further and he says even behind the wall is also Rishus Harabim. So your thesis would not hold up according to Rabbi Chanina's definition. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what Rabbi Chanina said. Eima al makom mechitza machlokes. What Rabbi Chanina really said was that the area of the wall is the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Not up until, but rather the area of the wall where the wall had previously stood. If there's a certain doubt as to whether or not the public had access to that area, because you're not really sure where the wall exactly was, that's where there's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer says it de facto has the din of Rishus Harabim, and therefore if you transfer to Rishus Hayachid, you've done a malacha. And the Chachamim say no, it's still a karmelis until you can actually verify that it is a Rishus Harabim. So that would be one way of explaining the machlokes. The ibayis ema. Now I'll tell you another explanation, that really we're talking about, again, we're only going to where the wall was. That's really the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, but it's not where there's a dispute as to actually where the wall was standing. Let's say we know we've chalk-lined exactly where the wall was standing, and we know exactly where it was, but there's still a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, because now that the public has the ability to step onto that area where the wall was, that's why Rabbi Eliezer says that now it has the status of Rishus Harabim, because the public has access to it in sort of like in an overflow fashion. Because this is the case of Tzidei Rishus Harabim Kamiflagi, where you have an area that is adjacent to Rishus Harabim. The Rabbi Eliezer savart Tzidei Rishus Harabim ki Rishus Harabim damu, v'Rabbanan savart Tzidei Rishus Harabim lav ki Rishus Harabim damu. Now let's just clarify. What we mean by Tzidei Rishus Harabim is that normally every public thoroughfare has the main drag, has the main street, and usually the areas that are at the edge of the street are not as densely populated with traffic as the center thoroughfare, because there's lots of stuff on the sides. Rabbi Eliezer says that nonetheless, even though it's not as densely populated, it still has a din of a Rishus Harabim, and the Chachamim say it doesn't. So here too, this machlokus over here has got nothing to do with rites of passage. It's got to do with the facts on the ground. Once this wall collapses, even if we know where the wall used to stand, the very fact that the public will squeeze into that area when there's when there's a big bulge of traffic means that for Rabbi Eliezer, that area has the status of a Rishus Harabim. The Chachamim disagree, and they say since it's not as frequently traversed as the real Rishus Harabim, it doesn't have a din of Rishus Harabim, it still has a din of Carmelis, and that would be the machlokus according to this opinion. So the Gemara asks, well, if this is the case, so then v'liflog b'tzidei Rishus Harabim da'alma. Then why don't we have a standard machlokus between Rabbi Eliezer? Instead of telling me a case where the wall of a chutzner collapses, just tell me straight up. Say, tzidei Rishus Harabim, the sides of a Rishus Harabim, Rabbi Eliezer says it's a Rishus Harabim, and the Chachamim say it's a Carmelis. That should be the machlokus, and Gamarnu. So the Gemara answers, if ligu b'tzidi rishus harabim ba'alma hava amrinan ki pligi rabbanon olei de Rabbi Eliezer hanimili heichadi kechifufe aval heichad oleka chifufe imimodulei kamash malon. The Gemara answers like this: in a regular scenario of tzidei rishus harabim, it was very common for people who were, let's understand, when you have a major thoroughfare, it was typical to have walls going all the way up to the main street, right? And these walls were privately owned by homeowners and by mavoi owners, right? And so they didn't want traffic scraping up against their wall. So what would they typically do? They would typically put pegs all along the side of the road right in front of their walls. And this would prevent people from moving up right up against the wall. And if I only would have had the machlokas by tzidei rishus harabim, I would have thought that that's where the chachamim say that it doesn't have a din of a rishus harabim because of the impediments that are deliberately placed there in order to prevent foot traffic. But in a case that we're talking about where there are no impediments placed in front of the collapsed wall, maybe the chachamim would agree to Rabbi Eliezer that it has a din of a rishus harabim, and therefore kamash malan comes along the Mishnah to tell us that no, here too there's a machlokas. Frek the Gemara v'hamitocha ka'amar. But wait a minute. How can you tell me that the machlokas, whether you learn like the first opinion or whether you learn like the second opinion as to where this machlokas is being stated, both opinions agree that the only time there's a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is where the wall was previously standing. But the chutzner itself, you're now telling me, is that everyone agrees that has a din of a karmelis. How then can the language of the Mishnah say not that way? The language of the Mishnah says that if you carry from the chutzner to Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaYachid to the chutzner, then you've done a malacha. But that's not true, according to what you're saying. The chutzner itself, everyone agrees, is a karmelis. It's only the area where the wall was. So the language of the Mishnah is all awry. The answer is the Gemara, Aidi da Amar Rabbanan mitocha, Amar Ihu nami mitocha. The Gemara says no. The word mitocha that Rabbi Eliezer used was only used for symmetry, in contrast to the Chachamim who say later on that when you carry from the Chatzar to a Rishus HaYachid or to Rishus HaRabim, you're going to be Pater. And there, because the Chachamim are addressing the entire Chatzar as having a din of a karmelis, including the area of the wall, that's why they were justified in saying mitocha. So for symmetry, Rabbi Eliezer also used the word mitocha to talk about the entire Chatzar. The Rabbanan Amar Rabbi the Rabbanan. So now the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. The Rabbanan who are responding to Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Rabbi Eliezer tzidei rishus harabim u'mahadru le'inu mitocha? Question mark. But the Chachamim don't make any sense. If Rabbi Eliezer was only discussing the status of where the wall had previously stood as being a rishus harabim, why then do the Chachamim in their response to show that they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, why do they talk about the entire Chatzar? That doesn't make any sense. They should address the same case that Rabbi Eliezer is addressing. The Gemara says, Hachi kamri le Rabbanon le Rabbi Eliezer. What they mean to tell him is as follows. Mi lo kamodis lan heicha de tiltel mitocha le rishus harabim u'strabel mitocha de pater mipnei shehi karmelis. Rabbi Eliezer, of course you agree that when you carry from either Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim into the Chatzar itself, you're going to be Pater because the Chatzar has the status of a karmelis. Don't you agree to that? So if so, Tzidei Nami Loshna. Then therefore it shouldn't, then the place where the wall had previously been standing should also be the same halacha, that even though it's mamish adjacent to Rishus HaRabim, but since it's private property, it should be judged as a karmelis as well. And Rabbi Eliezer, Hasam lo kadarsi lo rabim, hacha kadarsi lo rabim. And Rabbi Eliezer's response is no, that in the Chatzar itself, that's not open to the public, and there's no foot traffic. But here, where the wall was previously standing, whenever you have a bulging amount of traffic in the Rishus HaRabim, you're going to have overflow that's going to step on where the wall had previously been. And as a result, it has a din of Rishus HaRabim. That's what Rabbi Eliezer's position is. And we conclude that Gemara, we go on to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah now says, Chatzar shenifrasa l'Rishus HaRabim mishtei ruchoseha. Here Rashi tells us that we're talking about a case where you have a courtyard that on Shabbos itself, the walls collapse. And here the Mishnah is telling us that 2 of the 4 walls of the Chatzar collapse. And we're going to have to clarify why it was necessary for the Mishnah to say that 2 of the walls collapse, but that's the case. V'chein bayish shenifratz mishtei ruchosav, or if you have a house where 2 of the walls of the house collapse on Shabbos. V'chein mavoi shenitlu karosav o lechayav, and similarly if you have a mavoi where the carrier, the lechi or the korah was removed on Shabbos, which was the apparatus that you had put in place to allow you to carry. So now basically you've got problems because on Shabbos you're missing now the necessary, please open the Gemara for Benny, the necessary apparatus in order to enable you to carry. So what are you supposed to do? So mutarim ba'oso Shabbos va'asurim la'asid lavo divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion is that since at the beginning of Shabbos it was permitted to carry, you're allowed to carry. You're allowed to continue carrying for that entire Shabbos, and only for future Shabbosos do you have to make the remedy. You have to fix it. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, im mutarin la'oso Shabbos, mutarin la'asid lavo, v'masurin la'asid lavo, asurin la'oso Shabbos. And Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that no, if you can carry today, then you can carry for future Shabbosos. If you can't carry now, then you can't carry for future Shabbosos. Or if you can't carry for future Shabbosos, you can't carry now. The question is he coming to be Mekel or be Machmir? We'll clarify in tomorrow's DAF that Rabbi Yossi is coming to be Machmir. And he's basically saying that once the structure has been removed and is collapsed, you can no longer carry. I just want to make a very important point. We had started off today's daf with the machlokus between Rav and Shmuel, that if the wall between two chutzers collapses in the middle of Shabbos, Rav says you're not allowed to carry, and Shmuel says you are allowed to carry. It seems that at face value that Rav and Shmuel are arguing on the very same machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah. So the question is, why do you need Rav and Shmuel to argue when there's a Beferish Mishnah which says the very same machlokus? Tosfos addresses this all the way back on Daf Yud Zayin, and Tosfos says that it's really two different machlokos. That over here, the machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi is when there's a breach that opens up to Rishus Harabim. And the machlokus between Rav and Shmuel is only in a scenario where there's a breach between two chutzers, but you still have the outer walls of both chutzers blocking off the Rishus Harabim. So even though Shmuel and Rav argue in that case, they could both tell you, well, we both hold like Rabbi Yossi, that in a case where it mamish breaches on the middle of Shabbos into Rishus Harabim, we agree that you have to stop carrying. It's only the case of where you have a contained system where there's a wall to divide between two chutzers. That's where Shmuel would say that you're still allowed to carry. So I just want you to keep that in mind. The Gemara now says, "B'may askina." What are we dealing with over here, where we're talking about two walls collapsing of the chutzner or of the house? Ilema be'eser. So the Gemara's first challenge is like this. If you're telling me that we're talking about a breach in a wall of a chutzner that is less than 10 amos, so then the wall is still considered to be intact, and that breach of less than 10 amos, as we've learned before, is really just a doorway. So then it shouldn't create a problem of carrying anyway. And if that's the case, then even if you have on two walls of the chutzner, let's say on the eastern wall and on the western wall, two breaches develop, a guy shoots a cannon from the outside, and the cannonball shoots through from the east wall and then all the way through the west wall. And now you've got this big breach. But the point is that since each breach is less than 10 amos, it should still be a kosher chutzner to carry in. So what difference does it make whether it's a breach in one wall or a breach in two walls? It's still going to be each breach is like a doorway, and it should be certainly okay to carry. So I don't understand, says the Gemara, why need to talk about two breaches instead of one? So Ella biyeser me'eser ihachi afilu miruach echas nami. And what's the alternative? That we're talking about a breach that's wider than 10 amos? So then only one wall with a breach of wider than 10 amos should create a problem for carrying. Why do you have to talk about two walls? So either way, we don't understand why you need to talk about two walls instead of one. So Amar Rav la'olam be'eser shenifritza be'keren zavis the pischa be'keren zavis lo avdi inshi. Answers Rav, we're talking about a breach which is less than 10 amos wide. But here, the breach cannot be interpreted as a door. The reason is because the breach is in a corner, which basically means that at the corner is where the guy shot the cannonball and knocked down the entire corner structure. So as a result, even though when you measure the size of the breach, it actually is less than 10 amos, whether you measure it going like this or whether you measure it diagonally, it's going to be less than 10 amos. It's, let's say, 4.5 this way, 4.5 this way. Right? But the point is that because it's less than 10 amos in total, you should say, well, judge it as a door. No, you don't judge it as a door, because no one makes doors at the corner of a chutzner entrance. And because of that, it is a problematic breach. And the chiddush of the Mishnah is, that's what the Mishnah means when it says two walls. Two walls that come to a point. That's where the breach was created, and as a result, it's not kosher anymore, and you have problems as far as carrying. So now the Gemara says, V'chein bayish nifratz mishtei ruchos. So let's analyze the next part of the Mishnah using the same analysis. We talked about a house, that two walls of the house collapse. So here, we're not. The question is not so much the size of the breach, but rather the question is, like, if you have even one breach in a wall, it shouldn't be a problem, because we should say pitikra yored v'sosem. Once if you have a flat roof, remember what we had said. There's an opinion that states that the edge of the flat roof, you can say good achis, and you could say that you have an imaginary wall that goes down and covers that opening. So why don't you say the same thing over here, regardless of whether you have one wall or two walls? Even if you have two walls, you should say pitikra yored v'sosem. So the Gemara answers, Amri devei Rav mishmei de Rav, kigon shenifratz bekeren zavis v'kiruyo ba'alachson deleka lamemar pitikra yored v'sosem. So once again, Rav says, the reason why the Mishnah talks about a case of two walls is because we're talking about a breach that takes place in the corner of the house, where two walls meet. That's the breach that we're talking about. And the reason why we don't say pitikra yored v'sosem is because we're talking about a roof which is not a Middle Eastern roof, which is flat, but rather a steeple roof, an A-frame roof, which is slanted. And as a result, since the edges are not perpendicular to the ground, but rather they're at an angle to the ground, you don't say pitikra yored v'sosem. You can't create those imaginary walls anymore. You can only do that when the edges of the ceiling of the roof are perpendicular to the ground.
It doesn't matter if it's in the corner then. It could even be on the side.
Technically, yes. You wouldn't say that as long as, well, it depends. If the breach is wider than 10, so then then it would be a problem. But here we're talking about, once again, where the breach is less than 10 amos, and the reason why it's problematic is because it's in a corner, and that's as we had said before. Now, I just wanted to say, I wasn't being facetious when I said Middle Eastern versus European roofs. A couple times ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael, I had a tour. And the guy told us, anytime you see an A-frame roof in Eretz Yisrael today, it's only because Ashkenazi immigrants came from Europe and they imitated the architecture that they were used to in Europe. In the Middle East, the indigenous architecture of the Middle East is to have a flat roof, and that's why you find Arab houses all have flat roofs. And the reason is because the minhag is that once the kids get married, what do? You build a second story and they live on top, right? That was the tribal custom. That is the tribal custom in Arab villages today, and that used to be the minhag throughout the Middle East. And that's why Rashi says that when he says the roof is on a slant, he says like our roofs in Europe. That's the distinction, because I guess different cultural mores dictate the architecture of the structures. It's a very, very interesting thing. Tikra is a ceiling or a roof. Yeah, either one. Yeah.
If they have a domed roof, they don't want kids to live with it.
Oh, well, that's a good point. That's probably a sign of a mosque, because that's a place of prayer, and therefore it's not a residence. Okay. So now the Gemara says, so now Shmuel says, let's go back to talk about the first case of the chaser. You know what it means? Shmuel has now a totally different interpretation of the Mishnah, and he's going to give us his version of both the chaser and the bias, why the Mishnah has to say that two of the walls broke down. He says, afilu biyeser meyeser. You could say that the breach is even wider than 10 amos. So if so, then why do we have to say that the chaser breaches in two walls, even one wall is a problem? Mishum bias. The answer is because we have to discuss the case of the house. And in the case of the house, even if the breach in one wall would be wider than 10 amos, we would still say pitikra yored v'sosem. So therefore, we need to have two breaches. So now the question is, ubayis gufei tikshi, ma'ishlam miruchecha samrinam pitikra yored v'sosem, mi beis ruchos naminema pitikra yored v'sosem. So first of all, according to Shmuel, if you hold of pitikra yored v'sosem, so what difference does it make in the case of the house whether you have a breach in one wall or a breach in two walls, right? Even if the breach is wider than 10 amos, you should still say that the edge of the ceiling should go down and create that imaginary wall to seal it off. But now I'm going to ask you an even more fundamental question. V'su. Mi islay li Shmuel pitikra yord v'sosem. Since when does Shmuel hold of this principle of pitikra yord v'sosem? We learned just a few days ago that this is a fundamental machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Because beha'itmar achsadra bebika, that if you have an achsadra, remember what an achsadra is? It's like a chuppah. You have 4 posts and a flat ceiling. That's your structure. It's freestanding out in the plain. Rav Omer mutar l'taltal b'kula, Shmuel Omer imataltal ba'el b'dalet amos. Rav says you can carry throughout this achsadra because you say pitikra yored v'sosem. You look at the edges of the ceiling as imaginary walls going down, and therefore it's an enclosed structure you can carry. But Shmuel says you don't say pitikra yored v'sosem, and as a result, how can Shmuel suggest the same over here in our Mishnah? The Gemara answers, Halo kasha, ki lesle bedalet avol b'shalosh islay. The answer is that really Shmuel does hold of pitikra yored v'sosem. He just holds that you can't go so far as to say that when you've got all 4 walls that are completely open. But if you've got 3 walls and 1 intact wall, then you do say pitikra yored v'sosem. So over here, in the case of a house, you've got a breach in 2 walls. And so really Shmuel would hold of pitikra yored v'sosem. So therefore, the Gemara says, mikol makom kasha. So we still are left with a question. What difference does it make whether you have 1 breach or 2 breaches? If Shmuel holds pitikra yored v'sosem, why is there a problem in the house? So kedarmi beirav mishmei derav kegon shenifritz bekeren zavas v'kiruyo ba'alachson. Hachanami kegon shenifritz bekeren zavas v'kiruyo ba'arba, and some are gores ba'arba'a. Let me just explain what the case is. Answers the Gemara. Rav had explained that the breach is in the corner. Shmuel will agree to that as well. And Shmuel's going to tell you that it doesn't matter whether the breach is 10 or more than 10. Because the bottom line is that you're not, for some reason over here, you're not going to be able to say pitikra yored v'sosem, and you have a corner breach, which means that you cannot view this as a Pesach, you cannot view it as a doorway. So now the question is, why over here, just because it's in a corner, do you not say pitikra yored v'sosem? Rav had given an answer because we're dealing with a slanted roof. Shmuel says, I have a different approach. My approach is that the roof is perfectly flat. However, the same cannonball that damaged the corner structure also damaged the roof right above where this corner used to be. And instead of there being just a regular ceiling in that place, you now have a jagged area of the roof which is now there. And if you want to see a diagram, Rashi has a very good diagram. It's just very, very simple. If you see the corner which is now breached also has the ceiling which is jagged. The reason why it's jagged is because, and this is the essence of what I was saying before. Remember, when does Shmuel say pitikra yored v'sosem? 3 walls or less. 3 sides or less, I should say. When does Shmuel not say pitikra yored v'sosem in the case of achsadra? When all 4 sides of the roof, you would need to create an imaginary wall. So the essential point here, at least according to Rashi, is that because of the jaggedness of this ceiling, you have at least 4 tfachim of jaggedness on each side of the jagged edges. And as a result, if you count the number of sides, the number of turns that this ceiling makes, 1, 2, 3, 4, from one side to the other. And therefore, you've got 4 sides of the ceiling where you have to say pitikra yored v'sosem. And there Shmuel agrees that we don't say pitikra yored v'sosem in that kind of situation. I hope I'm making myself clear. Because of the jaggedness, because of the change of direction, each time you change direction, it's considered to be another side of the ceiling. And as a result, since you've got this change at least 4 times, you don't say pitikra yored v'sosem according to Shmuel anymore. Is that clear? Everyone got it? So now did I clarify it? Okay, just want to make sure. So now the Gemara says, Shmuel lo amar kerav, because alachson lo ketani. Now, essentially, the 2 answers are the same. We're dealing with a breach in the corner. The difference between Rav and Shmuel is that Rav had said that we're dealing with a slanted roof, and Shmuel says we're dealing with a flat roof that is jagged. So the question is, why doesn't Shmuel agree to Rav's interpretation? The answer is because he feels it's contrived to say that in the Middle East we're dealing with a slanted roof. The Mishnah should have made a point of saying that because that's really abnormal in the Middle East to have slanted roofs. And v'Rav lo omer kishmuel because imkein havi le'ach sadra v'Rav l'taimei domer achsadra mutal l'talta b'kula. And Rav holds that if it's a flat roof that's just jagged, Rav is of the opinion that you are allowed to carry because even when there's even four sides of an achsadra that do not have an actual wall, you still say pitikra yored v'sosem. So in that scenario that Shmuel has described, Rav would say you're still allowed to carry because it's like an achsadra. The itmar, and just to reiterate it, achsadra bebika, when you have a freestanding chuppah out in the middle of nowhere, Rav Amar mutal l'taltel b'kulo, Shmuel Amar in metaltlin ba'ela ba'arba amos. Rav says you're allowed to carry because you say even when there's four sides that are wide open, you still say pitikra yored v'sosim. You create the imaginary walls, and Shmuel says you don't. Now, Rav Omer mutal l'taltel b'kula because Amrina pitikra yord v'sosem. Shmuel Omer imataltel b'ela ba'arba amos l'amrina pitikra yord v'sosem. So this is the machlokus. Rav says that you can carry because you say that the walls go all the way down, and Shmuel says you can't because when there's four sides, you don't say pitikra yord v'sosem. So now the Gemara is putting aside the machlokus of our Mishnah and is just analyzing the machlokus of achsadra. So let's just spend the last minute or so understanding the machlokus of the achsadra, which is this open-air chuppah with four posts with a ceiling. Be'eser kule alma lo pligi. When the distance between one post and the other post is less than 10 amos, then everyone agrees that you're allowed to carry. Even Shmuel agrees, according to this opinion. The only time is kipligi bi'eser me'eser. The only time there's a machlokes is when the distance from one post to the other is more than 10. That's where Rav says that even if it's on all four sides, you still say piturka yored v'sosem. And Shmuel says no, because you've got two things against you. You've got, number one, the fact that it's open on all four sides, plus you've got distance of 10 amos, more than 10 amos from one post to the other. You do not say pitikra yored v'sosem. But the ika da amri, but others learn no, that's not the machlokes. Some others learn just the opposite. B'yeser kuli alma lo pligi, that when the distance between the posts is more than 10 amos, then no, there Rab is also machmir like Shmuel. Ki pligi be'eser. The machlokes is when it's less than 10 amos. That's where Rav and Shmuel have their machlokes. Now, v'ha da amar Rav Yehuda. So now, based on this difference of opinion as to where the Rav and Shmuel have their machlokas in the case of achsadra, now let's go back and revisit a case that we had seen some time ago. Korah dalid mater b'churva. We had seen that if you have an open ruin, basically a ruin which was used to be inhabited and now it's been broken down, and so there's nothing on the top, and you have a slat, you have a board that goes from one side of the ruin to the other, and it's at least 4 tfachim wide. So Rav Yehuda says you're allowed to carry underneath the korah, underneath this slat or beam, because we say pitikra yored v'sosem. And Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua korah dalid mater b'mayim. According to Rabba Baravua, we say the same thing. If you have a slat running across a body of water, then we allow you to draw water underneath it because that's called a reshus harabim because of pitikra yored v'sosem. So now the Gemara says, so money. So who does this go according to? Is it Rav and Shmuel or is it just Rav? So it answers the Gemara. Lahach lishna de amart be'eser lo pligi. According to the opinion that says that if the distance between one post and the other is less than 10, then everyone agrees that you're allowed to carry. So be'eser v'divrei hakol. Then this halacha would be talking about a slat that is less than 10 amos in length, and both Rav and Shmuel would hold that you can carry because both of them agree you say pitikra yored v'sosem. But lahach lishna de amart be'eser pligi kirav. But if you hold that in a case of where it's less than 10, there too Shmuel and Rav argue, so then this statement would have to be talking about a slat that is less than 10, and it only goes according to Rav, and it doesn't go according to Shmuel. Have a wonderful day.